You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Well, hello, everybody. Good to see you.
Yeah,
We're
hello.
here.
It's a special day.
are
We
here.
did it.
This is a very, very special episode because we have reached number 200.
Yes, a randomly round number that doesn't mean
Yay.
anything. Yay.
Okay, that does mean that we've done at least, I can do math, 600 different topics about strange nature things and haven't overlapped once.
Yeah, it's a few less than that, I think, because Victoria's not on every episode.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's a lot of topics. Thank you to everyone who's been with us along on this whole journey. We kind of debated, do we do something special for the 200th, some clips from some of our favorite episodes or talking about them. And we're like, you know what? People don't like that stuff. You know what they come
Which
here
we
for?
kind of did for
They come here for
episode
strange nature.
100.
Let's just give them more what they want.
Stuff.
Let's go for the bizarre.
So this week we've got just 3 fresh, weird nature topics for you. I think, Victoria, you're kicking us off for episode 200 here, right?
I am. I get to start things off here. And
Yes!
I came across this topic as I was scrolling Reddit the other day,
Love
As
it.
you do.
as I do. I came across a really striking image. And at first glance, it looked like it might be from a science fiction film or maybe an art image that somebody created. So it was a stormy night sky, but in the space above the clouds, there was this gathering of eerie, luminous red figures.
Uh-huh.
And the bottom halves of the figures were branched like tree roots or maybe one of those
Yeah.
old-fashioned twig witch brooms. And the top half sort of shone red light upward like a torch.
So cool.
What on
So,
earth are you
you know,
talking about?
Possibly a
I know,
group
I know.
of aliens just hovering in midair, pausing
I think they look
before,
like a red octopus sometimes up in
kind
the
of,
sky.
yes. They can look like that.
What?
Aliens preparing for invasion of the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no. This turns out to be entirely a natural phenomenon. Although it is not well understood, I will say.
Okay.
Rachel's so confused right now.
I am so confused.
Kirk knows exactly what I'm talking about, and Rachel is very confused. These figures are called Red Sprites.
Yeah.
And they are one type of a group of phenomena known as transient luminous events, otherwise known as upper atmospheric lightning.
Yeah.
Cool. Kirk
Awesome.
would know
They're
about
so
this,
cool.
the weather nerd.
Yeah, I'm a big, I'm a big nerd.
I had
why I do
never
the show.
heard of these before. I had never heard of these before.
I have
which I'm
not
a little
heard
surprised
of these before.
about
I'm so
because
excited.
I looked into lightning. They all there's a bunch of different phenomena that fall under this category of transient luminous events, TLEs. They'll have whimsical names that they've been given. So in addition to red sprites, there are
Good.
sprite halos, ghosts, blue jets, gigantic
love blue jets.
pixies, gnomes, trolls, blue starters, and elveses. So we have covered lightning a few times before on the show. Way back in episode 13, Rachel gave us an overview of what causes lightning and briefly discussed the possibly apocryphal ball lightning.
Right.
In episode 59, I talked about the extremely lightning-y area over Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And in episode 78, Kirk talked about the biggest lightning in the world.
Yeah, that was
Depending on
wild.
how you measure it. Yes.
That
Oh
was
my
a
God.
lot of lightning.
The longest one went for hundreds of miles.
Hundreds of miles, yeah.
Yeah. For all of that, I had never even heard of Red Sprites, as I mentioned, or any of these other ghosts and pixies and whatnot. So what even are these things?
Right.
First of all, they are associated with thunderstorms, and red sprites actually occur simultaneously to cloud to ground lightning.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, I'll get
Like
into
the
it.
upper
Yeah.
half almost. Yeah.
Yeah, the upper half. So lightning in general is pretty complicated and confusing, at least in my opinion.
Fair.
But it's basically, like, as Rachel, you covered way back in episode 13, it's basically like a big electric charge building up in a cloud during a thunderstorm. And then it discharges when the difference is too great for it to maintain. It discharges to the ground. And it's sort of like a really, really big version of the static electric shocks that you get in the winter.
Right.
Correct.
So, as I said, the science behind sprites is not totally understood, but it does seem that they occur above in the upper atmosphere, the spot where a cloud to ground lightning strike is happening. And they are really, really high up. They're not shooting directly out of the clouds, they're like way above it. And they last a much shorter amount of time. They only last about 1 millisecond, which is 1,000th of a second.
Oh, wow.
That is compared...
Which explains, Rachel, why you've never seen one in the wild.
Yes.
Right.
Indeed. Compare that with a typical lightning strike, which lasts around half a second. So it is much, 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 much shorter. So very hard to see. Although they're much shorter than typical lightning, they can also be much larger. So they can be as tall, reaching up as high as 81 kilometers or 50 miles, which is up into the ionosphere, which is like the second to last layer of the
Like
atmosphere.
edge of space, kind of.
Yes.
Oh, my.
And they can be up to 48 kilometers or 30 miles across.
No.
So they're enormous. Enormous.
That's huge.
And according to one NASA page that I found, it is not exactly lightning, but it is an electrical discharge that is a quote-unquote cold plasma phenomenon, which they compared to a fluorescent light tube. And the red color actually comes from the electrical discharge exciting the nitrogen gas in the upper atmosphere, which gives off this red coloration. And actually the bottom part of it, when it's in a different part of the atmosphere, like the lower reaches of the roots, can tinge into blue and white. Yeah. And these have actually been observed for centuries, even though they're quite hard to catch, as we mentioned. The first scientific report was in 1886. Just a red light was seen, basically. But since they happened so quickly, it was sort of easy to dismiss these reports as people imagining things, or, it wasn't really so easy to pin down. But then finally, by accident, actually, in 1989, someone photographed one when they were photographing something else to do with thunderstorms, I think, and caught one of these. It was a pretty low resolution image, but now if you go on the internet, and we'll put some on Instagram, there's some amazing, clear, beautiful images of these things. And they're now actually thought to occur above most thunderstorms. And as you'll see if you do an image search, they can also be seen from space, which is, it's so cool. These pictures taken from like the International Space Station. Yeah, it's really amazing. And as to these other phenomena, I'll just briefly go over what they are without trying to get into the science of them, which is poorly understood, and I don't really understand myself. So blue jets are one of the other really cool ones, I think. They're rarer than red sprites. They do come directly out of the top of a thundercloud, and as the name suggests, it's a bright jet of blue light. They seem to occur only occasionally, as far as scientists can tell so far, but they're still learning more about it. And elves, it's a singular. Elves is a large, red, flattened, expanding kind of donut-shaped disk in the ionosphere, so very high up, that lasts also about 1 millisecond. And ELVS is a silly acronym for emission of light and very low frequency perturbations due to electromagnetic pulse sources, which that's a bit of a stretch as an acronym goes.
They're like, we really got to make this elves.
We can do it.
Reminds me of some of those like bills that go through Congress where they're really twisting themselves into knots to make it into a good acronym.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so those are a couple of the other ones, but these are just so interesting. There's so little known about them. NASA's actually trying to get citizen scientists involved because there's so many images of these on the internet, but like they're not being indexed or shared systematically in any way. So they want to try to get people on board with sharing, when the image was taken and where, and, that kind of stuff so that they can learn more about them, which is really cool. So if you're into photographing, that kind of stuff and are interested in helping science advance, there is an opportunity for you.
Yeah, I think the
so
advent of the
cool.
digital camera really revolutionized the capture of these things by amateurs because it was just like, you're not burning film to do it. Why not? You have to find a thunderstorm that's way in the distance
Yes.
because you can't be under it. And it has to be like, clear sky where you are so you can see above the thundercloud. But people live in the Great Plains have the best chance of seeing them, and just pointing your camera above the storm basically and snap. You have to get your settings right and whatnot, but basically snapping off lots of photos very rapidly and hoping that you are catching them.
Yes.
It's very cool.
So that's what I got.
Go Kansas.
My sources
You know
this
your
week,
assignment.
Yeah. My sources this week were a blog post from NASA called Red Sprites Above the U.S. and Central America, an article on the space.com website, and I also got a little bit of information from Wikipedia.
Cool.
All right, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, Kirk is going to have something for us.
I sure do. All right, everyone, welcome back. Today we are traveling to Baja California in Mexico. Now, for those of you not from North America who might not be as familiar with Baja, that's the strip of land in Mexico that extends out from the bottom of the U.S. state of California, kind of heading south. Most of Baja is separate from the main portion of Mexico by the Gulf of California. And it's a peninsula of land that extends for 76 miles or 1,220 kilometers. So this is a pretty sizable
it's a good
chunk of
chunk.
land.
Yeah.
It's a long peninsula. If you're going, what are you talking about? Look at a map, and you'll be like, how did I not notice that was there?
It
So
looks
as we
like the
venture
little
down there
arm
today,
on the west side underneath California of Mexico.
yeah.
Yeah.
As we venture down there today, you might think twice before heading to the bathroom when you hear about a local legend. Beware
Kirk,
the
why?
ajolote.
The ajolote, okay.
Yeah, the ajolote is a very real and very strange creature, also known as the Mexican mole lizard. They are 9 inches or 24 centimeters
What?
long, but only
That's
about
pretty
a
big.
quarter of an inch or 6 to 7 millimeters wide. So very long and
so skinny. What?
Yeah, they have a segmented body that makes them look like a worm.
I hate
Their
that.
skin is light pink to white, and they're technically a legless lizard.
Okay.
But they do have two legs. So I know that seems strange. I'll talk more about that later. The legend, the thing that makes squatting bathroom goers pucker with fear, is that these strange looking creatures will attack your nether regions when you squat to use the bathroom outdoors.
What?
And according to legend, they will jump up, attack you, and burrow inside through presumably whatever openings they can find.
No.
And once inside, they viciously tear up your insides until you die.
Tell
Kirk,
me this is
viscerally
apocryphal.
cringed. Like, I
Yeah.
went from like sitting up straight and now I feel like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Why would you do this?
Yeah. Well, in the famous words of Professor Hubert J. Farnsworth from Futurama, good news, everyone. This is just a myth.
Okay.
Great.
You may poop in peace. The Mexican mole lizard, while strange looking, is completely harmless to humans. I'm guessing where this probably came from. These live underground. And probably somebody was, squatting down to pee on the ground or something and got the ground wet. And so these animals are like, what's going on? And like came up and someone saw them on the ground and was like, oh my gosh, this thing was trying to attack me because it looks
Or
weird.
maybe
And it's
it
like,
even
no.
bumped. Maybe it even bumped their nether regions.
Maybe.
'cause it
It's
was
like,
confused.
you were,
Right.
you just peed,
Maybe
you
they're
just peed on its
squatting on a
house. That's
log
probably
or
what the problem
something.
was. Could be.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Myths start in interesting ways. But we're going to dig into some cool, true facts about these strange little creatures. So it is basically like a giant worm with a lizard head and tiny front feet. They are very strange looking.
Yeah.
It belongs to a special group of animals called amphibians. And if that
I
sounds a little...
love that
sounds
name.
fake.
I know it absolutely sounds completely fake. It sounds like the word amphibians, but these are reptiles. They're not amphibians. There's around 200 amphibians
This looks
or
like
worm lizards is kind of the more common name.
this looks like the land version of an axolotl.
They've been compared to an axolotl in a way. I mean, they're not at all. The ones axolotls are amphibians and these are reptiles, but yeah, they kind of got a dopey looking face, and yeah, I
pink.
could see how people would think that.
It also
So-
reminds me of a hagfish a little bit.
Yeah,
Ooh,
they're
yes.
they're weird. This group is called the worm lizards, but and there's, like I said, about 200 of them in the species of worm lizards in the world. The specific genus we're talking about today, the bipes, only has 3 species, all close related and all found only in Mexico. They're basically kind of separated by how many toes they have on their feet, which is kind of cute.
That's
The Mexican mole
adorable.
lizard is known scientifically as Bipes biporus.
So it has
So
two
I
toes?
hinted at this earlier, but it does seem. That's kind of what I'd think from the name, but I think it has more than that. So
I
I'm
think
not
it just
sure.
has 2 feet.
Oh,
Yeah, I think that's what the species of epithet may be referring to.
okay.
So I hinted at this earlier, but it does seem odd to call it a legless lizard when it very clearly has legs.
Right.
But apparently, the term legless only applies to the back legs
Oh.
of an animal. Something I truly did not know until just this week when I was reading
Huh.
up on these guys. So
Wow.
you, I guess they consider those to be arms, not legs.
The front
That's
legs
kinda
are
how
like, what am I? Chopped liver?
No,
Right.
we're
Well, you're not
arms.
legs, you're arms, I guess. So,
That's weird. Okay.
and they're really tiny. They're like there's these little tiny little hands kind of attached to the side. They're not big old long arms, but they do use them to help with locomotion and kind of crawl their way around.
They look like little nubs.
Well, they use those little nub-like legs to crawl and burrow through the soil. These are insect eaters, not bum eaters, so you don't have anything to fear. But they are, looking for insects in the soil is kind of what they're looking for. So here's something fun as well. They don't have ears per se like we think of them, because those are just filled up with dirt if you're tunneling through the ground all day.
Sure.
But they actually
Right.
hear with their skin. They basically have an
What?
inwardly folded flap of skin that transmits sound to their cochlea, much like an eardrum would, which is just wild. They're basically their skin is kind of, or a part of their skin is helping them hear in the same way that an eardrum would.
Huh.
Pretty rad.
Fascinating.
That's wild.
And another
okay.
really cool thing that I learned about these little secretive creatures is about their distribution. So as I mentioned earlier, there's about 200 species of worm lizards in the world, and they're found like all over the world, presumably not in Antarctica, but places where it's habitable for most things to live. And because they're found all over
Lizards.
the world, I think for a long time it was presumed that this is a very old group of species that had dispersed to all the continents way back in the time of Pangea, like when the continents were all pushed together. And this has been a big theory that, like, okay, if you find an animal species that's sort of spread around the world, be different species, but if you find a group of animals like this, that, they probably started in one spot and spread very, very long ago when the continents were actually all smushed together. And this seems to make sense, as they are a subterranean little worm-like creature that can't fly or swim or anything like that.
Right.
But I read a really interesting study that used a technique we've talked about a few times on the show. They were able to look at the molecular clocks of the different species to determine how long ago the various species split from each other, from their common ancestor.
Okay.
And what researchers discovered when they did this is that the oldest versions of worm lizards came from North America. So this is a North American species. But here's the thing. This ancestor was around during the Paleocene and did not spread to the rest of the world until after the cataclysmic asteroid strike that wiped out the dinosaurs and brought an end to the Paleocene.
Okay.
Huh.
So just something of really important note, the supercontinent of Pangaea was long gone by then.
Yeah.
The continents had already started to
Split.
spread all apart. They weren't as far apart as they are today, but there were large bodies of water between
Yeah.
all the continents.
Because Pangea was like 200 million years ago, right? Something like
Very
that.
long time ago, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, you weren't just going for a little stroll through the soil to get to any of these continents that they're now found on. So it's kind of like, okay, how did if they originated in North
if they
America
can't swim.
and they had to cross a lot of water and they can't really swim, how did they get there? So these creatures seem to have been successful at what scientists call oceanic rafting, which is where new organisms spread when basically a raft of material carries them across the ocean. And we've seen documented cases of this in modern times as we've watched, things spread from island to island and slowly spread around the world. And so it's pretty wild to think that, think of this little critter taken to the open ocean, but it probably was not by choice. Hurricanes, tsunamis, other events can wash large amounts of material into the sea, and you never know where it's going to end up. And you just need like one pregnant animal or something, or, one male, one female animal to end up on another island. And it's not like they spread around the whole world at once. They got to one nearby place and it could have been a couple million years colonizing that area and then spreading to another place. But eventually they are now found all over the world because of this technique of oceanic rafting, which is just
That's
fascinating.
so cool.
But when you got, basically, they did this over the last 65 million years. So, they've had a little time to figure it out.
Yeah.
But that's what I have for you today, the bizarre Mexican mole lizard. Consider yourself lucky if you ever get to see one in the wild. And don't worry, unlike some of the creatures we feature on this show, this one doesn't want to destroy you from the inside.
Yes. Not in
Which
fact
I
a
thought
parasite.
I thought was very refreshing on this show.
It is.
My sources this week were Wired Magazine, Wikipedia, and a journal article called The Biogeography of Worm Lizards, driven by End Cretaceous Mass Extinction in the Proceedings of the Royal Society of Biology. So that's it. We're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have Rachel wrapping up the show for us
Woohoo!
with a whole,
Right.
exciting
I
topic.
have a topic, yes.
Excellent. See you soon.
Welcome back, everyone. But how fitting that on episode 200, all of our topics come together once again.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
They
Say
will.
more.
So today I'm also doing a little bit of a creature feature, one that I truly can't believe that we have. It's one of those that's been on the list forever and we haven't really talked about it. We will be going down to Brazil for my topic today. We're going to be hanging out in the
Shout
Amazon.
out to our Brazilian listeners.
Woohoo! We're going to be hanging out in the Amazon River Basin, generally speaking, because we're, of course, it's episode 200. I have to do an animal that lives in the water. Duh.
Crazy if
Sure.
you didn't.
Now, the creature that I'm that I'm going to be talking about today is a creature that lives in muddy water. Generally is pretty like a dark gray brown. It's scaleless. It's long, kind of snake-like, and is colloquially known. Try that again. Commonly known.
Colloquially?
It is
There you go.
commonly known as an electric eel.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
electric eels. I can't believe we
Nice.
haven't done electric
How
eels.
have we not talked
already.
about electric
I
eels?
know. I was checking our list and everything. We have a big list of all of the topics and everything, so that way we don't cover something twice. And
Wow.
we haven't talked about it yet.
That is wild.
And I just thought it was fitting because the electric eel, as much as people think of it as an eel, and it looks a lot like an eel, it's a very long, tube-like animal with a flat head and has a fin that goes under, that extends all the way along its back underneath it as well, almost all the way up to its chin. The anal fin goes all the way around. It's not an eel, though.
Interesting.
Much like how your legless lizard is not a legless lizard and isn't a worm.
I mean, yeah. Isn't a
And
worm,
like
yeah.
how red sprites are lightning, but they're not actually lightning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this
And they have
produces electricity. So I thought that this was a nice little fitting, like, oh,
It
look
all
at that.
comes
It
together.
all came together so nicely. So an electric eel is actually a knife fish. So it is a fish. It is not actually related to eels in the slightest. It's more closely related to carp, actually, than it is, and
Okay.
catfish
Really?
than it is anything or any other kind of eel. Which I think if you look at it, really does make some sort of sense. Like it's really long and tubular. It looks like a giant worm. And I say giant because these get up to 8 feet long.
Wow.
Oh no, I didn't realize they were that big.
That is very long.
They can grow anywhere from 2 to 8 feet or 2.5 meters. So that is one Kirk and 1.5 Rachel's. It is too much. It is too big. I don't like it. So generally they are hanging out in the slow moving oxbow parts of the Amazon river basin, just hanging out. And there's a reason for that is they are mostly blind. They're big. They are the top predators in their space, because I don't know if any of you want to, but I certainly do not want to mess with an 8-foot long snake-like creature.
Not particularly, no.
No. So this is a scaleless, like I said, this is a scaleless creature, which is pretty common with a lot of eels. They don't have scales. One thing that is very cool, it doesn't, and is very similar to other like eels, even though it is not an eel, we've established this. It doesn't have any pelvic fins. So it really truly does just have this really long anal fin that helps it maneuver and swim through the water, which is really cool because it's able to swim backward, forward, it can hover, whatever it needs to in order to search for prey. And that is really important because it's blind.
Right.
So it is
So wild.
You would think that you would want to be able to use your eyes, but if you are in a space where there's a lot of mud and it's primarily flooded spaces, there's going to be a lot of debris, so you don't have a lot of use for eyesight. But they do notice like movement, which is really important, and they can sense the electric movements and the electricity of other fish and everything in the water, which is really important and really cool. So since it is primarily using like electricity to try to sense and movement to sense its prey, it makes sense that it is then able to use electricity to take down its prey.
Zap.
Yeah.
It's more than a zap. So
It's just a little tickle.
yeah, it's a little more than a tickle. So there are 3 different species of electric eel in the world, and they are pretty similar to each other. There's some like differences in where they are and things like that, but for the most part, they're very similar. In order to generate that electric jolt that they are so well known for, electric eels, how they are set up. So I talked about how long their body is. All of their important organs, like their stomach, their brain, their lungs, are located right behind their head. In the first fifth of their body, that is where all of their important organs are, that help them stay alive. And the rest is dedicated to electricity generation. They have 3 organs that are the ones that generate that electricity. And there's still research to be done on how they all interact with each other. They're able to use or make 2 types of discharges. There's one that's really low charge and one that is high voltage. But it's weird because there's 3 organs that use it. So they think that there's some like prep work that happens, and they're able to work together to create balance within the eel.
Okay.
But there's still research that needs to be done. Overall, the maximum discharge that has been found from an electric eel is 600 volts.
I'm
That's a
bad
lot.
at electricity, but that seems like a lot.
Yeah, I'm also bad at electricity, so I had to look this up, and like it sounded like a lot. It's pretty much so when electric eels were first discovered by Western science, they directly led to the development of a battery. Okay? So
Okay.
in general, an electric vehicle, the stuff that really gives you like the shock is generally like the amps, or it's the amps and the current that'll get you. Volts are the electric potential that a thing gives.
Right.
So for context, an electric vehicle battery has a range of 600 to 900 volts to make the car run.
Okay.
So it's a lot.
I mean, something to keep in mind, like you said, with the amps versus volts and whatnot. Like when you mentioned, Victoria, getting like a shock from your,
you're definitely going to feel it.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you get a shock, like a shock from like, static electricity, some of those can be 10, 20,000 volts.
Oh, really? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But the amps are so small that it's just like, it's inconsequential. So like saying that it's 600 volts, it's
a lot
really
for a singular animal to make.
It is a lot for an animal, yeah. The question is like, if we know how many amps it is, we can calculate out like, the actual danger.
And like generally it does it in like a pulse. So it's not in that's how much the voltage is. Generally it will do it very rapidly, which is what gets people, or what gets their prey, because it can be a rate of like 500 hertz. So it only lasts like a tiny amount of time, but that's really, really hard to do in a very high voltage environment. So it's high voltage, it's high frequency. So I guess my resources, like the electric current that can be generated for each pulse is about 1 amp, which is not a lot, but is still pretty good.
If that goes through your heart, it's enough to stop your heart.
Right. So generally speaking, people don't really have to worry about being injured or hurt by electric eels. Are you going to feel it? Yes. And if it gets you like well enough and you're really messing with an electric eel, and if you have a heart problem or anything like that, yeah, maybe stay away. But for the most part,
Don't
they're
give 'em a hug.
not really gonna do anything to you. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
But it is really cool that they are able to use that. They're able to use that as both like a defense mechanism, but they're also able to use that as a hunting mechanism. So they are able to disrupt the electric field or the electricity in the creatures, like the other fish that they are actually, because they're able to use the water around them. They are electrifying the water around them, and that will kill the fish or the crustaceans that they are trying to eat, which pretty good. That's awesome.
Yeah, when I've done like field research for fish, we've done electrofishing, which is super illegal if you're, unless you're doing research. But basically, you put a like Honda generator on your back, just like a small one on like a external frame pack, and then you fire that thing up. And for your two, different electrodes, one is like a big long rat tail of like metal that hangs down and drags behind you in the water, like some like aircraft cable. And then in your hand, you have a wand with like a big circle on the end that you put into the water, and it sends out electrical pulses, but it's like a pop, 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 pop like that. And if the fish are a little ways away, they let the alternating sort of current coming through causes the fish's body to convulse and basically makes them swim toward the electric current. And then when they get close enough, it overloads their electrical system, and they don't die. They just sort of go into shock. And you can scoop them up, take them, measure them and whatnot, and then put them back in the water. So it's like you can see how when animals that are so reliant on some sort of electrical, system get overloaded like that, if at the very least can stun them, and then they're easy prey.
Right, which is really important because, again, the electric eel is blind. So they do need to be able to, they're able to sense it, the movements and everything. So if they're able to draw it in and get it really nice and close and then it stops, they can eat it. So that's pretty ingenious. And it does have to be pretty high voltage because fresh water has really like high resistance in water when it comes to electricity. So you need a lot of voltage in order to actually make that work.
Yeah, when I was doing that, the electrofishing research stuff, one person would have the backpack on shock, and everyone else would have nets, and they'd be scooping the fish up that were swimming toward it, or that had kind of floated to the surface. And we were doing like just categorizing, trying to figure out what's in these streams. And every once in a while, you'd get your hands in to pick this fish up, and you'd be like, hey, quit pulling the trigger on the electrofishing rig when my hands are in the water.
Ouch.
That hurts.
It tingles a bit.
Yeah.
It gets your attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of like touching an electric fence.
Oof.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much like that.
It's
Depends how
fun
close
to do
you are.
once.
If you're far enough away, you're like, oh, that tingles. If you're real close, you're like, you need to stop that right now.
Pretty much. Yeah. The other really cool thing to that I wanted to talk about is they actually are able to breathe air. They don't do it often. They have a mucus membrane in their mouth that allows them to be able to take gulps of air gulps of air from the air outside of the water in case like the water that they're in, because they're in a flooded basin, doesn't have enough oxygen for them to be able to breathe, which is really, really cool.
Very cool.
And not every animal has that, which is really, really fun. For me, at least. I think they're really cool. They look funky. You can't see, they have eyes. They look really funky. The fact that they're able to open their mouth and be able to like absorb oxygen that way, especially since there are dry seasons, and because in the Amazon River Basin, you need to still be able to breathe when that happens,
Sure do.
Yeah.
Breathing's good, it turns out.
Yeah. And the last thing that I'll leave y'all with is that the eels, like I thought, when I think of fish, I don't tend to think them as very long-lived, but these guys oddly can live anywhere from 15 to 20 years.
Oh.
Which
wow,
is
that's pretty
much
long time.
longer than I was expecting them to be able to live. Like, good for them, but okay. Yeah, which is just really fun. But that's what I had for you all this week. It just happened to be a really fun tie-in for all of the topics. Maybe not everybody's brain went into all of that pattern recognition, but I love it when we all are able to like gently tie in. We did it. 200.
Yay.
Oh. One last thing is that my sources this week were Wikipedia, the Smithsonian National Zoo, the National Aquarium had a great little article, and so did National Geographic.
Nice.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we did it. 200 episodes. What do you think? You
Woo!
want to sign up to do 200 more?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
I look forward to episode 400, but before we do that, we have to do episode
300.
201.
Ooh.
Well, and 300, and
Right.
there's 200 to do. One a week. There you go.
There we are. All right.
Some of you listeners have been listening from episode number 1 from the very beginning. And so to those who've been around for the entire ride thus far, thank you so much. It means the world to us. It's so awesome. We love it when you hear from you guys too, whether you're a brand new listener and this is your very first episode, or whether you've been around for the whole ride. It's just really cool to hear all the stories about, the stories you liked and what we get little messages. People are like, oh my gosh, I love just like listening on my way to work and then sharing, with everybody at lunchtime, like, you won't believe this thing I heard, and it's just really fun to be part of everyone's day like that. And it's, we could sit around and talk about the stuff by ourselves, but it's really fun to also be able to be sharing all this with all of you. So thanks for being along on the journey.
Yes.
Thanks everyone for being here and listening for conversations that we would probably be having anyway, but giving us the excuse to go out and learn more anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for giving us the excuse to do this on a regular basis and to share it with you all.
Cool. On that note, we'll see everybody next week.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.